genuinely, I think it's the most important thing. I think it's before anything happens, a relationship must be made, and there has to be mutual trust between each party or each individual before friendship is developed or before anything can really kind of take off from there. I've always believed, and it's really been my approach all the way back to when I was a kid. I think being nice to people and being open to their perspectives allows for two sides to be shared and two perspectives to be shared, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurs and founders, and especially in communities where you don't typically know to find them. There's a sense that, and this is driven by real examples historically, there's a sense that the world of big money and the world of corporations is so cutthroat and is here to just eat you up.
Our featured speaker today is the Associate VP at Generator, serving as a perpetual source of energy and enthusiasm as he passionately empowers founding teams and aids in building startup ecosystems. Nate, it's a great pleasure to have you as our featured guest today. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us.
I'm so honored to be here. I really, really appreciate what you all do, and really have enjoyed the Founders Voyage podcast. As you've all reached out, I've been intently listening. So it's an honor to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for listening and for your kind words. So I was wondering if you could kind of take us back a little bit and talk about where you grew up and maybe some of the early life experiences or the people that came into your life that you feel really shaped who you became or what direction you took.
I love that question. I have more recent, I guess my entire life, I've really been in the same area of the world. I'm based in Peoria, Illinois, Central Illinois, as it's commonly known. I was born here, raised here, had my first career here, and grew professionally here in Peoria. So my life has, in many cases, it's rare to find success in one place. And I think I've been very fortunate to be able to be here and work and grow, live and thrive in the place that I was born. So yeah, I'd say, thinking about some of the bigger influences that kind of shaped who I was, of course, family. I think that's the cliche answer, and I could talk for hours about family and how important that was. There's been a number of mentors in my life that had really presented the opportunities and helped drive my own self-belief that, I could do more than what I was doing, and to always continue to believe in that aspect is that you're always growing and it never stops. So I really do point to some of my leaders, my bosses from in my first careers. I think back to being a journalist and just being a scrappy guy out of college, graduated out of Bradley University with a degree in journalism, and started my first job as an editor of a small town newspaper. In that role, I got to work with so many fascinating individuals, but it was also a public facing role. So I also got to engage as a journalist with community leaders and impact and change makers, and sometimes not the best individuals in the world when you're reporting. So I could name a few names. I think largely it's a culmination of a lot of fascinating people. And I think, as I've grown, I've realized that not everybody gets the opportunity or is comfortable with going out and engaging with so many people. It's just been a variety of diverse experiences that have really shaped who I am and how I believe and what empowers me and, what motivates me.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. I think it's super cool how you've transitioned through quite a few different, very unique relative to each other roles in your career so far. How do you think studying journalism has helped you now with your current role?
I love that question. I think I genuinely relate my joy and passion for journalism to pretty much everything that I do. And there's a saying in journalism, going back to a great influence. There's a great columnist here in Peoria. His name's Phil Luciano. And when I was studying at Bradley University, I was taking one of his classes, and it was all about feature story writing and how to story tell. There's a line that he would often say that was so important in journalism, and it's show, don't tell. That line doesn't just apply to writing. It's very important and impactful to how you write and how you communicate a story, but it applies to everything else. I think show, don't tell in its core is really beyond storytelling element. It's also all about transparency. And in journalism, you realize as you dig and you meet with various community leaders or individuals You find out some people are very transparent and you find out some people are not. And that's where you find, a lot of the stones that you should probably be lifting up and looking underneath. I think when it comes to journalism, it's the curiosity aspect of being a journalist applies so well to what I do today. This applied so well to what I did in the senior care field as well in healthcare. So that curiosity really, really drives a lot of the work that I do. And then beyond that, a lot of the work that I do today is all about helping founders tell their story and helping them understand the importance of showing what they do versus telling what they do. So yeah, that's a great question. I enjoy that and gave me some time to really kind of reflect on that.
That's such a great answer. I mean, I can totally understand because that's such an important thing for a founding team to be able to articulate. And sometimes it's the most difficult part. Like you can deliver, but you need to be able to show people how you can deliver. I can see how you're such an asset. So how did you initially become part of that incubator? And what made you take that leap? I mean, it looks like what you were doing before, was working in a senior home, which is a very needed thing. Were you kind of itching to make the leap into entrepreneurship, or was it spontaneous?
It was very spontaneous, but almost by design, if you will. It was something that I never envisioned for myself, but come to find out 3 years later that it was the perfect thing for myself. So I'd say, of course, in senior care, healthcare, particularly during the peak of the pandemic, was a very transformative time for healthcare. Not just during that time, but really set the stage for and kind of lift the cover on what's going to be coming for healthcare, whether that's, unique advances or big, massive challenges. And what I saw were big, massive challenges coming, particularly in the senior care field, where we're now at the very beginning stages of seeing the baby boomers aging and needing care. Of course, being on the front lines of providing care to individuals in their homes, you started to see how difficult this was going to be comparative to the number of individuals we're graced with on this earth that are willing to provide that level of care. And they're few and far between. And I think that was my big concern at that point in healthcare in the middle of the pandemic, is we had all these people who really needed help and needed care. And they didn't want to be in a shared care setting, obviously due to concerns about contracting, any sorts of diseases or illnesses. From that end, I started to recognize, like, I'm here, I'm helping the problem, but I don't know that I'm helping solve the problem. It felt more like a Band-Aid than a solution to be able to provide care. And it's so necessary. So don't get me wrong on that. Providing care today is so important, and it's going to continue to be important tomorrow. But I believe that if the right individual's there that maybe has some ideas that can really look into, what are some potential solutions. I think this is where it really made sense for me. I'll walk into with the spontaneous aspect of this. I think largely once we got through probably the worst of the pandemic, I'm, openly was going through some burnout, as many healthcare workers were going through at that point. And I think at that point, I'd also recognize there's got to be another way. So genuinely, I left my role in senior care with nothing in place. I did something my father told me never to do. Don't leave your job without another job lined up. I think that was, it was the best decision. And even my father would tell me today that thank God she didn't listen to my advice, because I think that gave me the opportunity to just reset for a couple of months. Give me the opportunity to reconnect with my family. It gave me an opportunity to reconnect with my son and be just a human being for a while and remember what that was. And when you work day in and day out, sometimes we forget those aspects. So that gave me a chance to really take my time and find something that was going to be right for my life long term. Lo and behold, Generator, the company I work for now, had partnered with an organization called Distillery Labs here in Peoria, which is an incubator support. It's an entrepreneurship support organization here in Peoria. And part of that was they were going to launch Peoria's first venture capital based or focused accelerator. I knew nothing about accelerators. I knew very little about venture capital. I knew a lot about business, and I knew a lot about storytelling. But there's a lot of those elements. So it's like, okay, this is going to be a risky jump. I loved it. I really studied the culture of Generator. I think that really, really appealed to me. Seemed like a work environment and a team that were going to be individuals that, had the same level of ambition and energy that I had. Immediately, just from a culture standpoint, that stood out to me. Then I think, obviously from my previous roles in senior care and in journalism, I think impact has always been important to me in terms of the role that I do. I'm not a 9-to-5 worker. You couldn't keep me to 9-to-5. I love working on problems. I love being a part of the community. And I love that what I do full time goes far beyond my own paycheck. That's what ultimately made that spontaneous, but also by design, switch so necessary and so fruitful for me up to this point.
Taking that sort of leap of faith where you're like, I know that I need to change something. I don't have a safety net at the moment, but I need to step off and take this chance to clear my head and, reconnect with family is such a scary move. But I also think it's super empowering in a way because you feel like you can do anything. And then you found this amazing role that you're really, really enjoying. I feel like that pushes you forward as a person to grow your skills, to learn new things, to, become maybe a bit more of yourself than you felt like you were previously. And I think that's really, really great to hear about. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of what Generator offers and what you sort of feel is the key value that it has relative to, say, other competitors in the market?
I love that question. At the core, Generator is a venture capital firm and an accelerator network. It's based out of Wisconsin, founded by two attorneys back in 2012 that had recognized there are a number of entrepreneurs here in the Midwest, in the areas that you wouldn't think of finding a tech startup. I think I even put this in my bio. You won't find us in Silicon Valley. You won't find us in Los Angeles, in New York, in the places that you typically think of finding big tech, because we've discovered at Generator more than anything that there are entrepreneurs everywhere, typically right next door to us. The difference between those that go on to thrive and succeed is purely the community and the resources around them. And I think that's where Generator really, really stands out and makes an impact, is it believes in finding those ideas and that talent within the communities you wouldn't think of. Mid-sized cities like Peoria, where I'm from, or Huntsville, Alabama, down south, Kenosha, Wisconsin, up north. These are areas where it's like, these are small towns, but they're hardworking towns with a lot of great people and a lot of great talent. And I think that's really our differentiator to your other question, Spencer, is that our bread and butter is being able to support underrepresented founders and also to support founders from underserved communities. And when I say underserved communities, that could mean a variety of things. So underserved from a resource standpoint, underserved if you're an entrepreneur from a coaching or mentorship standpoint. Those things don't typically exist. It's not something that's invested into, largely because we've long been told to believe that it can't be done in these communities. And we are continuing, day after day, proving, and our founders continue to prove that, you don't have to be in those areas to be successful, to go out and raise money from venture capital and to have an opportunity to scale a problem that you're solving. That's really what we do. And what really makes us different is, there's nobody else in the world and no other accelerator in the world that does and focuses on what we do in terms of the founders. I'll throw one other piece is it's very personal. A lot of accelerators are classroom style, offer webinars, recordings. There's elements of that will provide information at scale across the country and across the world. But we are very intent on taking a concierge approach with our founders. That means we are meeting one-on-one with them. We are checking in on their KPIs, their key performance indicators. We're helping them establish accountability metrics, and we're helping them learn how to walk the walk and talk the talk. So when they do go and pitch to an investor in Silicon Valley, that investor is going to, number one, either their eyes are going to be wide open, their jaw's going to drop, saying, wow, where did this come from? You're from the Midwest. And that's what we hear frequently from investors is we know that this is a G-Beta company. We've seen them because we know they're not from Silicon Valley, but they're from the Midwest. So they must be from G-Beta or from Generator. So really, those are two of the biggest key differentiators for us.
I really appreciate that, focusing on the people first, and knowing that is going to, perpetuate the product that you're looking for. I think Generator is a really interesting company. I want to make sure I'm getting this right, but it looks like to me, like I saw that they have an international presence and they pair with programs that already exist like G-Beta. I am curious, because I was looking at it like across just the US and like in a place like Detroit, that really has already kind of come back in a lot of ways. It has the reputation it has in the US, but it really has. I saw that they were hiring entry-level people through Generator to help incubators that are already in that area. So I guess there's always this trade-off to me with like corporate ownership. I'm wondering from your perspective, like how do you see the pros and cons of that with Generator? It sounds like it hasn't really changed what G-Beta is doing. It's really made it that much better. Do you feel like that's the vibe you get generally, that it's elevating all of these smaller incubators that wouldn't exist otherwise? Or does Generator also say, well, here's what we need you to be delivering, for metrics so we can keep you in our network, so to speak? And this is completely opinion based, just based on your experience.
Yeah, so a lot of the markets that we exist in fact, all of the markets that we exist in, we are not there without a partner. And usually those partners are either a corporate entity, a government entity, it could be a grant as well. And those partnerships are really driven through our sincere focusing on corporate innovation. So in a lot of cases, we host and partner and build relationships with a lot of different large companies. And we bring some of those executives together to really talk about what problems we can solve together and how, our network can help support that. And so a lot of times when you see a G-Beta program pop up, just like you mentioned with Detroit, I'm going out there next week for Michigan Tech Week. We partnered with the Michigan Founders Fund. Michigan Founders Fund is a group of entrepreneurs that came together to create this fund to elevate underrepresented founders. So there are missions that are aligned with our mission as well. So naturally, part of that is now we get this really awesome opportunity to run an accelerator in Detroit and provide our level of coaching and services in partnership with what Michigan Founders Fund offers to founders today already. We get to combine our efforts and bring some real unique programming to individuals and entrepreneurs in that region. So that's really, really exciting. And that just gives a sense of, I think, to your question about how does corporate opinion or corporate mindsets maybe shift how we operate. In reality, it's kind of a unique thing. I think it's when we ultimately, when we walk into an ecosystem, we get to be the third party. In many cases, Generator enters, they're based out of Wisconsin, but they're going to be this third party entity coming into Michigan or coming into Peoria, for example. So there's an element there where it allows a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more of like an openness to different perspectives. And I think that's what's really, really healthy, is that each community, each region kind of has its own identity and goes about business in its own way. And when you bring a third party in and you give them a little bit of autonomy, that being us, that tells me and that tells us that, there's open-mindedness that exists here. And being open-minded is so, so huge to get through any barriers a community may be having, any challenges that they've been having. And particularly if those same challenges have existed forever, that means that something has not been embraced in terms of change. That's where we get an opportunity to come in and say, here's what we can offer. This is what we can do. And this is what we recommend. And this is what we have seen has worked here, here, and here. It's so impactful from that perspective. And that's what makes our partners, whether they're corporate entities or government entities or whatever, that's what makes our partners and our partnerships so incredible, is that they really believe in what we do. And by believing us, and for us to be able to really buy into what they're trying to achieve and accomplish in their communities, really allows us to find an opportunity to create some real impact and see real measurable results as the outcome.
I think that's phenomenal. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you've come to a lot of your perspectives and places that you've worked and things that you've considered through quite an empathetic mindset. The healthcare work that you've done, the journalism, trying to understand people's stories. And I imagine a lot of working with people at Generator involves a lot of empathy and understanding. From your perspective, how do you think that sort of, and if you agree with me, obviously correct me if you think I'm wrong, how do you think that sort of having empathy and understanding other people's stories assists with understanding a team that you're working with or the goals of a founder and things like that?
Yeah, genuinely, I think it's the most important thing. I think it's before anything happens, a relationship must be made, and there has to be mutual trust between each party or each individual before friendship is developed or before anything can really kind of take off from there. I've always believed, and it's really been my approach all the way back to when I was a kid. I think being nice to people and being open to their perspectives allows for two sides to be shared and two perspectives to be shared, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurs and founders, and especially in communities where you don't typically know to find them. There's a sense that, and this is driven by real examples historically, there's a sense that the world of big money and the world of corporations is so cutthroat and is here to just eat you up. When I engage founders for the first time, it's, the first several meetings are very much centered around building trust. And like, there's no reason to go any further, because more often than not, they're already logging in to a call with me, or sitting down over coffee with me, just somewhat guarded. Because when you hear investor, when you hear venture capital, it's immediately intimidating. And it was for me, honestly, when I walked into this role. And, of course, Generator's, all about building relationships with investors, because we have to do that to be able to connect them and drive them to our founders. That was intimidating. You think of investors as people with lots of money that are genuinely just only interested in the ROI, and they're just interested in some sort of profit or return on investment. That was an intimidating process to start reaching out to them and talk to them. And you learn that in reality, particularly in venture capital, most of the people you're engaging with are just like you and I. They go home every day with their own challenges. There's nobody preparing dinner for them. We're all just human beings working. They're just like us. They're managing a fund of a number of limited partners and that have contributed millions and millions into these funds. And then from a venture capital standpoint, it's their job to find what's the best way to distribute them. So their roles are just as much to build relationships and build trust as well. Going back to empathy, there's so many founders that have seen and watch. And even if you look at, and I love this show, so I'm not hitting on Shark Tank at all. I love Shark Tank. I think it really kind of creates a unique introduction to the world of startups and how to engage with investors. But it's genuinely not that way. There's a lot of due diligence. These decisions aren't typically made when an investor and a founder are considering investment. They're not made in a 10-minute span with rapid fire questions and cutthroat responses. I think it's very much the due diligence is there. When an investor is looking to invest in a company that we work with, sometimes that conversation takes a month. It can take a little bit longer as well before a deal is made. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes when that's happening. So for a founder to be able to trust the investor, because the founder is about to give up equity in their company, they're about to give up ownership in their idea, they have to really believe in the investor that they're working with. And we tell founders, it's going to be easy that any investor could say, I'm ready to cut you a check, but don't jump to say yes. That's going to be real exciting. It's your first level of validation where it's like, oh my gosh, my idea is worth something. But if there's not trust there, if the investor's mission is not aligned with what the founder's mission is, it's going to be doomed to failure. It's going to really wreck that momentum that the founder had. When in reality, if they'd been a little bit more patient, waited an extra month or whatever it may have been to be introduced to the right investor with the right connections and the right network, that would have made all the difference in the world. So those things are so important, and having trust with individuals are so important. For us at Generator to be the bridge between the investor, the corporate world, and the founder who just created this idea out of his basement. I mean, they're two different worlds. And to bridge the gap between them, it's a little bit of magic, because you're taking two worlds that otherwise we're thinking would not get along, and you're bringing them together, and you're helping them see the value of working together. And that's where real change comes in. And that's where we talk about and we hear about in the news or in opinions about elitism all the time. And yeah, elitism exists. But I think what we're finding out is, how do you bridge the gap between elitism and you and I? That's big. And when you do that, that's when real change happens. I could go on forever for that, but I'll pass it back to you.
That's amazing. I really appreciate how you see the focus of this company, that the culture attracted you. And I think you're what's going to continue to drive that, you and the people that also work there that feel that way about it. I really like that you've articulated that Generator takes such, a human approach, and GBeta does. Hello, all. I hope you are enjoying this episode. I want to ask you, our listeners, if you could give us a review in your podcasting platform of choice. We don't have sponsors and we don't run ads, but we are looking to grow. So if you feel we bring value to your listening experience, please drop us a review when you get a chance. Thanks so much. Now on with the show. So I was wondering what the selection process looks like, because I think you just take on 5 teams at a time. And then what are the expectations after that? Are there contractual obligations to those teams to produce certain metrics, or eventually give some part of equity? What does that whole process look like, selecting, and then what do you expect from them for deliverables?
The interview process, the recruiting process, and then the selection process. Let me tell you, it's a roller coaster of emotions as you go through this, because when we're recruiting, we're meeting many entrepreneurs. Depending on the community you're in, it can be anywhere up to hundreds of them that have applied for a program. So in G Beta, it's a 7-week accelerator. The founders that participate in it don't have to give up any equity thanks to the partners that we've established with. So when we work with those corporate entities, they're funding the program so these founders can have access to a real accelerator without giving up equity and without paying a thing. The only thing the founder is investing is their time, and that's incredibly valuable, which means we have to be on top of it when we're working with them. We can't waste their time. Startups' time is so precious, and they have to be able to fail fast so they can move on to the thing that's going to work better. That has to happen so quickly. So we can't really waste much time there. I think when it comes to G Beta, largely as we are working with these entrepreneurs, because we're working with these entrepreneurs, what we really want them to be able to do is take their idea to the next level. So some of the outcomes that we're looking for and their goals, but not every founder is going to follow this path. But we have 3 outcomes that, we like to brag about with the more than 1,000 startups that we've worked with at this point. Is we want to see them go on and raise their first $50,000 from an investor, or not necessarily from an investor. It could be from a non-dilutive grant where they didn't have to give up equity. So we want to see that happen. We want to see them go on to participate in investment accelerators. Of course, G Beta is a free no equity accelerator, but then we also have our generator flagship accelerators, and those do take equity. That's pretty common. And it's not just our accelerators. We want them to go pursue any investment accelerator that may be out there. Techstars, Y Combinator. I mean, these are all phenomenal resources that startups get a lot of great outcomes out of. So really, when we're working with founders, it could go any way for them. It really could go any way for them, and they can get out of the network as much as they put in. And we don't want to guide them. That's another thing that I think can be really high pressure for founders, is if you're really comfortable with giving up equity in your idea, if you're really uncomfortable with that, hearing somebody tell you to go give up equity and pressure that on you is unhealthy, especially if you believe you can bootstrap this and you could do this without giving up ownership. But sometimes I think largely when entrepreneurs and founders do find that success and they're realizing there's so much demand out here, I don't have the team to support the growth for it. That's where you see founders do go out and fundraise, because okay, I see the opportunity now. If I love this solution and I'm really passionate about it, then I certainly want to get it into more hands. And I want people to be able to utilize this and create more impact and solve a problem. When we talk about, what we're doing with our founders, we're really trying to drive them to that growth. And whether they're looking for investment or they're looking to just continue to put more R&D into their ideas, either way, that's what we're looking for. But core of the answer to the question is, in many cases, the founders that we're looking to work with are raising their first amount of funding and going through that very, very stressful period of having to go out and talk to an investor. And so once they do that, in each G Beta program, each of the 5 founders, each program will pitch to at least 25 investors. And in most cases, it's the first time they've done it. So it's a scary time for founders. But imagine after they leave program, what do they do after that? Is they've already had that experience. They've already gone through that barrier. And now they have that confidence. They believe in themselves. Going back to what I had said earlier, they now believe that they can walk the walk and talk the talk. And now they can go out and actively pursue those opportunities when they need them and if they need them. So it really does come down to empowerment in program and teaching the value of expanding your network. And post-program, it's confidence. It's like, hey, I can do this alone, but Generator is here whenever I need them. We tell founders all the time, we're here for them for the life of their business. If their business fails, that we're here for them for the life as a founder. So when they move on to their next idea, we're going to be there to support them.
That's very cool. I really appreciate you giving us that rundown. And it's interesting, variety of different startup experiences that you've talked about there, from like bootstrapping to more investment heavy, and the willingness to accept that maybe this isn't the perfect idea, but this is the person that you want to invest in. I think that's really, really good. Andrew has asked a question in the chat. Can Nate share about the challenges of starting, especially for the early stage small biz, small town angle through Gen Alpha? in case he hasn't already shared about it.
Yeah, representative. I think the question was around G alpha, which is really kind of it's a precursor to G beta. In many cases, I joke that G alpha is our G beta beta. So G alpha is really, it's a venture workshop. It's not a studio, it's a workshop. It's for individuals who are even earlier stage than ready for G beta, that maybe what we often hear, and maybe you've heard the phrase napkin stage. It's like, you go to school and you're in the back of your mind, you have this thought of, oh, this would be really, really cool. And how many of us, I think we all have those ideas that have sat there, and many of them have faded because we failed to write them down and just moved on to the next thing. But some of them are really passionate about it. These solutions are just thought of just because they're working everyday jobs and they're recognizing challenges, just like I did when I was working in senior home care. There's got to be a solution to this. This can be done better. I think we all experience that in our daily lives, but it's the difference between those of us who believe in our ability to, okay, let's dig into this more and see if we can solve it. But it's those of us that are really, really, really passionate about it that are going to go look a little bit further. And passion, I think, breeds expertise. If you're passionate about something, then you can become an expert in it because you're willing to dedicate and focus your time on it. So going back to Andrew's question, I think that's what we're trying to indicate in G Alpha. We're trying to find those potential founders and individuals, but they're not always like scalable startups. They could be a Main Street business. They could be a restaurateur, a future restaurateur. And then some of them could be those scalable startup founders. It's a wide variety. But I think when we talk at the G Alpha level, the importance of validating the problem that you're solving is so huge. And this is where many entrepreneurs make the mistake. And I will openly say, I know Andrew and the question that he asked, he was a big part of helping me understand the value of really understanding what your customer segments were and what your customers actually wanted. And do customers actually want what you are putting out there? And the biggest mistake that most first-time early stage entrepreneurs make is assume that their idea is what people want. They assume it, they build on it, they do everything, and they do this all by themselves without talking to anybody and taking in perspectives. And then they go out and they launch their product. They're really excited. They see nothing happen as a result because they didn't spend the time to understand what their customer segments were. They didn't understand to validate that what their idea was. And it may be that their idea is still really, really good. It's just their approach to solving it was wrong and wasn't appealing to the masses. So I think in G Alpha, that's what we really try to help those very, very early stage founders understand is we've all had those ideas that say it's $1 million idea, it's $1 billion idea, but most of us don't go out and prove that it is. We just assume that it is. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of founders, and particularly in a lot of shifts in venture capital as a whole over the past few years, is a lot of ideas that haven't been well validated or well tested out have had millions and millions of dollars thrown at them only to see them fail. And that's caused drawback. That's caused some gun shyness from investors, which in turn has impacted entrepreneurs and founders who are genuinely are onto something really, really unique and world changing. And so that's the chain reaction of a whole bunch of bad ideas getting a whole bunch of bad investments into, is that a whole bunch of good ideas that didn't get any investment are going to die because we've wasted money on the wrong people and the wrong idea. So this is what we really teach at the G Alpha level, is to understand the importance of validating your customers. And then once you come into G Beta, it's more of a matter of, okay, now how do we go out and make your first sale? And sometimes we'll work with entrepreneurs who have made their first sale. We're trying to help them learn how to sell reliably. That's going to be what's important to investors, is that they see traction, that the founder is able to develop traction behind their idea. But then also going back to G Alpha and, maybe the companies that are not venture backable, but they're brick and mortar and retail, that customer validation is equally important. And assuming your customers in the region or the small town that you exist in is why you see the brick and mortars rotate in and out with owners and new businesses, because people have the idea and they think it's going to be successful, but they didn't put the effort up front, not because they made a mistake or didn't know, it's because nobody was there to tell them that's what you should do. Imagine the failure rate of startups and small businesses if every community had a resource to help them understand that. The failure rate would be so much lower than what we talk about today. We talk about small business being the riskiest business you can be in, and starting a business being the riskiest thing you can do. if you have the right resources around people to where they can make well-informed decisions about their approach and their strategy, oh my gosh, can you imagine how much lower that number would be and how many successful business owners we'd have in each of our communities? So I think that's really what it comes down to answer Andrew's question.
I really appreciate that. And going back to what you said about G Beta supporting like the individual founder versus the company or the idea, and what you're sharing now, like you're learning alongside with the founders, thinking about it this way, really testing the market first will make your idea, will make you as a founder that much better. I think that really speaks to your, personalized and tailored approach. And I can see how you've gotten better and better at doing this, as it started just with passion. And now you really have a process. That's quite amazing. I want to pass to someone else in the community who has a question for you. Carlos, do you have audio?
Hello, guys. Nate, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I'm curious to hear, what do you think about results, failure, and money? That's my question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Results, failure, and money. I haven't had this question before, and the three elements, when you asked it, I immediately went to a number of different things. You can have results based off of failure, and you can gain money based off of failure. But I think neither of them are dictated by money. So results and failure are not dictated by money. Results and failure are dictated by the belief of the individual behind them and their willingness to really buy into it. The money will come as both of those things have been kind of worked out. So the results is going back to what I had said earlier about show, don't tell. Results are the show aspect and failure is the tell aspect, because when you fail, you have to tell others that you've worked with, like, this is what I did that didn't work. And so this is how I'm getting results now. To answer that question, I think looking at results and failure, let's make an equation out of it. Failure plus results equals money. And I think that's where we see a lot of founders, we talk about and we embrace failure. It's a success. Failure is a success. And the faster you can fail is an even greater success, because you are finding out what doesn't work quicker so you can pivot, or you can make the decision that, yeah, maybe this is not worth risking my mortgage or my family's happiness to buy into. So I think that's really big. And then when it comes to, so once you failed enough to find the path to results, now you've got something to build on. Now that you've got something to build on, that you've discovered that people want and that they like, then you're either going to generate revenue from those customers, or if you need to go seek investment in fundraise, those results are going to be the show aspect to the investor of what you're able to get in terms of return on investment. So I'm giving you an answer there kind of from a bootstrapping perspective, as well as a fundraising perspective. Carlos, I hope that answers your question and at least gives you a little bit of a perspective. I hope that really covers what you were looking for there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nate. I think you're so right about founders have to understand that it's like their belief in and push for their idea that results in whatever the results of the business are. That's very true. And associating it just with money just isn't the right way to go about it. Now, Andrew and Nancy have sort of amalgamated a bunch of questions together in the chat. So I'm going to try and cohesively put them into one thing and see what we can get out of it. But feel free to interpret this in a way that sort of makes a lot of sense to you, if that's fair. Andrew was asking about, not everyone's cut out to start a business or be an entrepreneur. What's your perspective about that? And how might people apply the entrepreneurial skills regardless of if they're starting a business, right? So if they're in a particular role or something within someone else's business or things like that, what do you think of the skills that come from entrepreneurial approach that can be applied there, whether or not you're starting your own business? And then Nancy has added on the question about digging deeper into what are the character qualities that successful founders share in your experience. What do you think it is that sort of elevates someone's ability to succeed as an entrepreneur?
I'd say there are three words: coachability, curiosity, and community. So 3 C's: coachability, curiosity, and community. The coachability is the characteristic, and curiosity are a characteristic of the founders that we see have the most success, because they're open to others' perspectives and they're able to receive perspectives that maybe they strongly disagree with. They're able to receive them in a way that allows them to at least consider it, but also know it's it's not the right path for me. And because I've already discovered this. So I look at coachability and curiosity as like the two most important factors in a founder that's going to go on and be successful. I'm going to be open with you. I think I've worked with so many different founders and entrepreneurs who believe that their idea is really, really good. And I'll test that. And we test this in kind of our interview process and selecting a cohort as well, is how coachable are they going to be? Because we can bring them into our accelerator and introduce them to 30, 40, 50 mentors. But if that information is not going to be received, number one, the mentor is going to recognize that whatever they say is always wrong. Why would the mentor embrace or latch onto that individual to coach them anymore? It's really frustrating to work with somebody who always thinks they're right. I think that's where, that curiosity from the founder is equally coachability. I mean, I think they're very similar characteristics, because curiosity says, I don't know everything. Even though I'm very well versed and maybe even an expert in this, I still don't know everything. Somebody knows something better than I do. If you can embrace that, and that curiosity is going to allow you to ask more and more questions, like, just like journalism, that curiosity allows you to get a better story. And just like the questions that you're all asking, that curiosity gets more of an answer out of me. I think between those things, coachability and curiosity then helps a founder develop a community around them, people that are like-minded, subject matter experts that also believe in the solution that the founder is working on. I think those are the two core characteristics, very much so. Those two, curiosity, coachability. You must be that as a founder. You have to be. You have to be curious and you have to be coachable. Otherwise, you'll have the hardest time in the world building a community around you, because you've already told people you're not willing to hear their perspectives and their opinions. That's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate when we do see that with people, because we do see a lot of ideas that we really like, but also the founder behind them, you almost know it's not going to get anywhere, because this individual's not going to ask enough questions, and they're going to assume a lot of things, and they're going to go to market with a lot of assumptions, and they're going to fail quickly. And then likely when it fails, they're going to have excuses that were not relative to them. They're going to say, this isn't my fault. This was everybody else not embracing this idea. You see that happen a lot. And I think that's really unfortunate, but it's a quality, right? It's a quality in some individuals. We all know them as, those that are always right and will always tell you that everything that they do is successful. Gosh, I see through that so well. Success, I've long believed, and as I grew older and older, I long believed that success was something you just believe in. And if you believe you're going to be successful, you will. Oh, that's so wrong. It's so wrong. Success is based off of who you put around you. Everything is based off of relationships, and everything is based off of being empathetic and building a community around you. To answer your question, I think that's really kind of the way I look at it.
Thank you so much for articulating that. I know we're hitting you with a lot of questions here at the end. I'm going to try to put two together. There's a little discussion going on the questions and discussion text channel, which is really great. So as a coach, how do you advise founders to come up with a successful elevator pitch? You can kind of take that holistically, or if there's just, one thing that you found that you think really vets a successful versus an unsuccessful pitch. And then how do you coach founders to know when they should let their idea die?
That's, oh gosh, two great questions. So as I answer the first one, I may get distracted from the second one. So I may prompt you again for that second aspect there, Nancy. So the pitch aspect, and again, maybe the theme of this podcast will be show, don't tell, because I'm going to keep on going back to this. So when it comes to the pitch, then the show really comes out, right? We don't want founders to tell investors that their idea is going to be successful. We want founders to show investors how their idea is going to be successful. And the pitch deck templates that we offer to our founders, and openly we offer those pitch deck templates publicly. You don't have to go through our accelerators to see what we're sharing. You don't have to be selected into our accelerator to understand we share how to pitch. You can attend our lunch and learns and do things of that nature, participate with our cohorts as well, or just have office hours with us. And we'll happily show you what a good pitch deck looks like. And that was captured through years and years of working directly with hundreds, if not thousands of investors who have openly shared, like, this is what we need to know when we pitch. A founder has, in many cases, no more than 30 seconds to capture an individual's attention, whether that's a mentor or an investor. And particularly when you're talking about investors, know that they are seeing every year thousands and thousands of pitches. Imagine how draining and how much that would burn us all out. I've seen thousands of pitches at this point. I'm starting to feel that burnout. That's why those first 30 seconds are so important, because I'm more often than not, I see pitches that, this was weak and I'm not excited about your idea and I'm already bought out. Now, we do the best that we can because we're at early stage and we have to be much more open to ideas and helping them, because most of the founders that we meet with don't know how to pitch or have never been shown that resource. So we have a very open mind about that. So we're really focused on the individual and the idea behind it. But when it comes to investors, you have one opportunity and you can't burn it. If you are fundraising, it's a full-time job. There's no such thing. It's very, very, very rare. And I've never heard of it in terms of making one pitch and landing a deal after that one pitch. That's such an unrealistic perspective. We tell founders all the time, you're going to have to pitch 50 to 100 times. That means you're going to hear no 49 to 99 times before you get one yes. And are you ready for that? That's where you can kind of see for a founder if they're cut out for this, if this is right for them, if they're persistent enough to believe in their idea and they built the community around them to support that, and their curiosity and their coachability has helped guide them along the way for that, they'll be able to see through and be able to pitch 100 times to get that yes, because they know not everybody is there. So going back to the pitch again, those 30 seconds are huge. If your elevator pitch in those 30 seconds are not special and are not eye-grabbing, it's just like the lead in a story you read in the newspaper. And gosh, nobody reads newspapers anymore. But if you read online, the lead is what draws you in to read the rest of the story. For a founder, that first 30 seconds and that first slide that they put up on their pitch deck is what's going to tell an investor, I need to cross my legs and sit back and listen. Because I think if you don't capture them there, they're bought out. They're already looking at their phones. They're talking to somebody else they work with, whatever that may be, because they've been through it so many times and they know. So that's what we really, really focus on with our founders. Going back to what I talked about bridging the gap between maybe, the elite and the person working on an idea in their garage, is if you can teach this person how to successfully communicate and impress this person up here, the world balances out. And that's really, really cool. And that's where you see real change happen and real action from. So Nancy, did I answer the second part of the question or did I get distracted?
No, I think that you did, because we were saying, how do you coach founders to know, when they should let their idea die? And then it came up with like a very concrete point, but you have to balance that self-reflectiveness and stubbornness, I think.
Yes, absolutely. If you've gone through 100 pitches and now you're moving on to 150 and 200 and you keep hearing no, that maybe doesn't mean the idea needs to die. That maybe means that there needs to be a pivot. But at the same time, pivot is expensive. When you're trying to fundraise, you're typically going off of your runway. That could be a couple of weeks. It could be a month. It could be 3 months or 6 months. So time is of the essence. Everything has to move fast. And when that runway is out, there's no more money outside of what you're drawing out of your own personal life savings or your own assets. That's definitely when you should stop. That's where you're not putting yourself and your long-term personal health and safety at risk by investing more than you can afford into an idea that still nobody has validated for you. I will never tell a founder to stop ideating or to give up on their idea. What I will do is tell them to stop wasting their money on it. You don't have to spend a lot of money to validate your idea. In fact, you don't have to spend any. You need maybe internet access. And even if you don't have internet access, you've got your 2 feet, if you're lucky, to go out and pound pavement and go ask questions and get answers and validate your idea. If you are spending lots of money, and I see it all the time where founders will spend thousands and thousands of their own money into marketing dollars off an idea that has not been validated. Oh, it pains me. It pains me so much to see that, because they're doing the wrong thing. And you can do marketing just by doing customer discovery. But if you're marketing something that nobody wants to buy, it's like selling a ketchup popsicle. It's just like nobody wants that. But you thought it was a good idea for some reason. But I don't know. To answer that question, that's kind of where I'll go. There's a lot of answers to that. But I think my biggest concern is when somebody's putting their own personal mental health or their own personal life in jeopardy because they believed in an idea that nobody else does.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Now, we have slightly gone over the hour, so I really appreciate you sticking with us. But we do have one last question that we always like to wrap up with. Again, I want you to interpret this in a way that sort of makes the most sense to you. It's very open-ended in that regard. But the basic question is, what words of wisdom, piece of advice would you like to leave us with today? That could be something you've read, that could be something someone's told you, that could be something you've come up with, however makes the most sense to you.
I love that question. Thank you again so much for this opportunity to be here. It's been really fun and very reflective too. So I think the biggest thing that I've ever learned that created the biggest change in my life and changed really probably the trajectory of my career forever was when I learned the value of ultimate responsibility and what that means. We live in a world of a lot of individuals who will make a lot of excuses for mistakes or blame others for things going wrong, but never accept responsibility. And that affects our lives in our work, it affects our lives at home, and it affects how happy we are. And I think the biggest change, and I wish I had learned it much sooner than just around the age of 40. I think the biggest change for me happened when I finally understood what ultimate responsibility means. When you walk into a situation and you're there and you're present and it's around you, everything is within our control. You can't manipulate everything into your control, but the way things kind of work out is within your control. And so when things happen that go wrong at work, especially, in management or leadership, this is big. It's that it's easy to point fingers and say it was this, and this, but not me. But the reality is, you were there. You had the opportunity to help influence the outcome. And if you can't realize and accept that, how are you going to recognize the areas where you were able to be successful? And how are you going to recognize the areas where you understand that, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? And what can you do differently the next time to be better? And I think those are 3 questions that I've started asking myself over the past 5 years. When something doesn't go well, it wasn't because I intended for it to not go well. It's maybe because I made a mistake. But the reality is I accepted ultimate responsibility for that. And I think that's, if we can all make a better effort of understanding that the things that happen around us and the people around us are all impacted by ourselves, and we have the ultimate responsibility to really kind of navigate that, then I think we would all be a lot better people. And that applies at home. And that changed my life at home as well. And that understanding that when my wife or my son wasn't happy about something, it was probably because of something that I've developed in terms of a belief system for them, as opposed to me. And this is where, the arguments between my wife and I stopped. I always raised, you think that arguments in a relationship are normal. Yeah, they are. But if they're happening every day, that's probably a concern. And I think that's where, once I understood that I'm responsible for things that go wrong, whether I was the one that caused it to happen or not, I could have influenced that impact. So I guess my piece of advice is for everybody to really, really, really dig deep and understand and look into themselves in terms of how responsible they are for the world around them. Once you understand that, you start to see so many different solutions and you become less stressed and less argumentative about it, and you can find happiness.
And great advice that is. I really appreciate you bringing that full circle and for all that you help others to see, helping us take ownership over the parts that we can change. That's important, not just for entrepreneurship, but for life. Thank you so much, Nate. We really appreciate your time, your thoughts, and everything you shared with us and taught us today. If people do want to connect with you and learn more about the program or just you as an individual, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I live and breathe on LinkedIn a lot. It's a great place. Please connect with me and feel free to share my connection there too.
We definitely will. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone that joined us today. Spencer and I and the rest of the Nine Founders feel very fortunate to be part of this community with you and to bring you cooperative learning experiences like this one each week. So please feel free to follow us on social media, listen to past episodes, either through the website or by searching Founders Voyage on your favorite podcast platform. And we'd also love to hear your nominations for future guests. And Nate, if you have anyone that you think would benefit from this network or from being a podcast guest, we'd love to hear that too. So thank you so much again, everyone. And we hope that you have a great day and evening ahead.
Thank you so much for coming on, Nate.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.